Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Corey Johnston. My pronouns are he, him.
And my name is David Richards. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And
Right.
I think there's a lot to talk about again this week. So I remember when we first started this idea, or talked about this idea, I was thinking, okay, after the election is over, is there really enough politics in Saskatchewan to fill like 45 minutes or an hour? And then like we're going to an hour and 20 every week because there's so much stuff to talk about. And expand on as well. So, but I think we'll have another one of those weeks this week, I suspect. So,
yeah, it probably helps that we both have opinions and like about every single thing in the world.
That is a very polite way of referring to the thoughts I have, just opinions.
Yeah, that's right.
44-year-old white guy ranting. Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, I've even done the 40-something white guy ranting in his car.
Okay. Nice. All right.
So
I haven't done the car one yet, so maybe that's something to look forward to. Where the ball cap. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I still think I'm less toxic than most of the guys that do.
I think so too. Yeah. I suspect that is very, very true. So where do we want to start? We got a throne speech. That's some exciting.
That seems like a good spot. I know. I just highlighted a few of the I guess talking points.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was. Let's see here.
There's a lot of good in there. Like we'll start with that. It's a throne speech, not a budget or an actual legislation. So we can take that with as many grains of salt as we want to take it with, but some good things in there, some things that could go good, could go bad, depending on how it's implemented. And I suspect it'll be the latter based on the government, but the childcare spaces is a good thing. Yes. Funding for kids with autism, that's a positive right off the hop. Covering the cost of glucose monitoring, like some of the stuff with kids, I think is positive. That's maybe where you try and soften the policy decisions of conservatives is by implementing stuff when it comes to protecting children. Oftentimes you end up hearing the whole anger towards their parents, or if their parents did this or that or the other thing, the kids don't deserve stuff, which I think that type of rhetoric even turns off a lot of conservatives. So I think that might be, it's a positive sign that Mo isn't going that route.
Reduce seniors' ambulance costs by 50%. I mean, sure. That's something.
I can't imagine that's like costing the government that much money, but it probably makes a big difference for those who are affected by it. Yep. The fact that ambulance rides cost money is, I remember discovering that a few years ago. I was actually it was in my previous job, was helping someone out, and I found out their credit was in rough shape, and I was trying to help them figure out why, because they were like, we pay all of our bills all the time, and went through it all. What it was is they had a son who had suffered a heart attack. It was a kid in his 20s, had a heart attack. They called the ambulance, and the son passed away, and they forgot about this ambulance bill because of dealing with their 20-something-year-old son's funeral. Completely forgot about it, slipped their mind. A couple years later, discovered it had gone. The province had sent it to collections. This wasn't Saskatchewan. This was Alberta. Okay. But province sent it to collections and tanked their credit. Yeah. And it's just one of those things where, like, if I found myself in that spot, I wouldn't think of it, right? Because I know now, but I'm just so used to this idea that we have healthcare coverage in Canada. The idea that ambulances aren't part of healthcare.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, right? Ambulances, your teeth, your brain.
Yeah, that's right.
None of these things are part of your health, apparently.
No, that's right. This is all separate.
All separate from health. And the drugs you take, the medicine you take isn't
your
part
eyes
of
aren't part of
your
health.
eyes. Which parts of your body don't count?
Yeah.
So, it's one of those weird things to me. And again, cutting it to 50%, it's a good thing.
Sure.
And I think that's one of those ones where for seniors, it makes a difference. I think, that's one of those ones where we talk about the American healthcare system so often, where it's as expensive as it is because people end up they end up avoiding preventative measures, which cost the system more in the long run and cost themselves more in the long run, right?
Yeah.
One more example of it's expensive to be poor. Not calling the ambulance because you can't afford the ambulance ride.
It's a real thing. Yeah.
Could magnify the issue and increase costs in general. And like my healthcare plan, I guess this is another reason why I don't know. My healthcare plan through every employer I've had covers ambulance costs,
right?
Like, supplemental health insurance. And I have to imagine most middle class or, salaried employees who have benefits are going to have supplementary healthcare that cover that as well. So the people who have to pay for ambulances are probably the people who can least afford it. So,
I've been actually, despite having worked in a field where I was probably covered for ambulances in my healthcare plan, I've never used an ambulance. So.
No, neither have I. I had and I guess this isn't because of cost. This is because of me being a moron and wanting to and embarrassed about taking an ambulance. I had a heart attack scare a few years ago.
Oh, geez.
And it was just like, I don't really need an ambulance. I'll drive to the hospital myself. Right? Like if it had been a heart attack and something had gotten worse during the drive, like I don't know what I was thinking at the time. This was 11, 12 years ago. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I've never needed to call one either for myself. I've had to call one for others who were in distress, but
I've been oddly insulated from a lot of like people having major health issues near me.
That's fair. I'm the guy that I've had a number of circumstances where it's been a crowd and someone has been injured or hurt, and I'm like, no one's doing. I guess it's me. It's my job to do something. I'm part of the no one if I stand back. So
that's right.
What are some other highlights that we got here? That home reno tax credit keeps coming in and out over the years. I think in the 10 years that or however many years the Sask Party's been around, they've introduced it and scrapped it, introduced it and scrapped it. Yeah. I guess not even scrapped it. I think it's always had
like a deadline,
a time horizon, right? Like it's been for the next 1 year or 2 years. So this one will probably be the same.
Yeah. This is one, it always seems like it's a big seller, right? Like it really
absolutely.
But I mean, there's huge swaths of the population that don't have any interest in a 10% renovation.
Not at all.
Benefit, right?
Yeah.
And
like 10% up to 20 grand means that someone doing $200,000 repairs to their home.
That's a lot.
Not a lot of people have $200,000 to do repairs to their home. This is like the big end. The big ticket on this is people like doing the buying and flipping homes. Right. Like that's someone comes in, buys a home for 210, does, 150 grand of renovations on it and then flips it for 450. Right.
Yeah, like this saves them 20 grand on those renovations. And yeah.
Which is, it's like, on one hand, that specific use, it leads to gentrification and there's issues there. Yes. That said, it is still, it is an economic driver. It's getting money back into the hands of people. That can then, it's trickle up economics. This also isn't, someone with the $20 million a year capital gains income isn't going to be benefiting from this all that much either.
Yeah,
right? 20, the 20 grand.
But that individual 20 grand means almost nothing.
Yeah, exactly. They'll still benefit from it, very likely, because they probably are doing at least that much renovations all the time because, it's new granite countertops cost a lot and stuff like that. Or marble countertops, I guess, if we're at that end.
Yeah. Who knows what rich people like? I don't understand them.
The Residential Tenancy Act, that's a positive indication, allowing victims of sexual assault to unilaterally break their long-term rental leases.
Yeah, that's seems like a good move to me.
Definitely one of those ones that seems like common sense. Also, it's the implementation that'll determine that, right? Like if the level of proof that's required in order to take advantage of it is so onerous that no one will ever actually do it. Again, it's the implementation on that. And of course, that just becomes fodder for people who are conspiracy theorists about sexual assault, right? It's the people who think it's all made up. This will be fodder for them. So that's it. That's not a reason not to have it there, obviously.
Right.
But again, it's one of those ones where implementation is important.
They've got some focus on protection from human trafficking here. As usual, I'm always going to be concerned that this is going to unfairly target sex workers and not the people who traffic humans. So
one of the things that they talked about is civil remedies, including civil forfeiture, which is like we already have that. That already exists in Saskatchewan. Again, it's always the thin end of the wedge on that is always related to sex work, and it's always related to human trafficking. And very likely, if someone speaks up against it, the accusations will of course go to child predators and that accusation, right? Like that's always how, when we start taking rights away from people, we start by saying the only people that we're targeting are child sex offenders, and then it just mysteriously seems to expand well beyond that as time goes on. And as you said, like who is actually going to be the one suffering?
The application, always seems to be at the forefront, right? Like it's through police. It's not through like some kind of systemic tracking of like people who are, making X number of dollars through ways we can't track. It's always the person who's probably paying taxes on their income from sex work that ends up having their civil assets taken.
And when you listen to sex workers, it is very consistently they talk about decriminalization as the most important step to their safety. And if you're wanting to reduce non-consensual sex work, which I think everyone does,
of course,
is eliminate the underlying conditions that allow it to happen in the first place, right? You eliminate poverty. You could for every dollar you spend on having a police officer harass someone who is doing sex work, you take that same dollar and spend it on poverty reduction or homelessness reduction or mental health supports or parenting classes, or like there's all of these other places you could spend that same dollar to actually impact the issue. And sex workers time and time again will say draconian measures that target sex workers, or even criminalization of their clients, or others who work within that apparatus of consensual sex work, make things more dangerous. You hear this all the time from the right when it comes to gun control, where they talk about if you criminalize guns and like you're turning law-abiding citizens into criminals and Well, that's essentially what this is as well, right? You turn law-abiding citizens into criminals, and at that point, as soon as you take someone's method of survival or job of choice,
either way,
and turn it into something that's a crime, that all of a sudden takes away protections rather than adds them. So
yeah, that's right.
Again, implementation is going to be pretty important on that. But I'm this is the one where I was saying I'm apprehensive based on the track record, because civil forfeiture is always a dangerous road to go down, because it doesn't require, because it flips upside down the presumption of innocence.
Right.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that when civil forfeiture laws get put in place, it is a way of punishing people without them being found guilty. So the moment someone is arrested, the state can seize their assets. Yeah. They can take their car, they can take money from their bank account, they can seize their house, they can take all of this stuff. And even if that person is never found guilty, even if they're never even charged with a crime, if they're merely arrested, is the point of arrest, even if they never sort of continue to progress through the court system, there's no obligation to give that property back to the person who's been arrested, right, unless they can prove they're not guilty. Like it literally flips the presumption of innocence and guilt, such that it really should be against our Constitution. But.
Yeah, like it I guess it's hard to know it isn't technically, against the Constitution, but it certainly seems like it is a violation of one's right to exist, like live and have a home.
and it isn't against the Constitution. It should be like this. It goes against the principle of our court system. It goes against the principle of innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
And again, it's I can understand why it is a popular tactic in this specific instance, because there's a visceral desire for the worst of the worst not to get away with what they're doing. Right? Like if you're thinking it's a child trafficker, if you're thinking it's a child sex trafficker, especially, absolutely, like string them up, lock them up, throw them away the keys, right? Like that is this natural, visceral reaction. I
was listening to something on Vice News Reports the other day, and they were talking about when it comes to human trafficking, something like 75% are actually like immigrants, like people moving from one country to another.
Yes.
And 23% are children, and then the rest are like men, I guess. And but that still means, like, if you want to reduce trafficking, then you need to address issues like immigration in a helpful, supportive way, instead of just making it illegal to enter a country in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's people paying. I can't remember the term anymore, but paying a human trafficker. Yeah, they don't realize that's who it is.
Coyotes,
they're paying
that's what they're called.
Paying someone to sneak them into a country.
Yeah.
And then it turns out they're not who they say they are, and then all of a sudden someone is in the traffic system. But anyhow,
so that's
it's again, it's this idea that it can be fought with more cops. Which is essentially what this is, right? It's fighting with more cops.
Yeah, which is antithetical to what I think is the best.
And again, there's just better ways of doing it. And I remember, and again, I'm showing my age. I remember back, it was probably in the 80s or in the early 90s, there was this really, really big movement amongst the whole law and order conservative folks about victims' rights bills. That was the big thing, right? That was the buzzword of the year or buzzword of the decade when it came to this topic. Victims' rights was always at the forefront. And even that is not really around anymore, because we don't listen to who are ostensibly the victims of the crimes they're trying to stop.
Right.
And I think that ultimately is where the failure comes in, is if first of all, there are some people who they're trying to quote unquote protect who don't see themselves as victims because they're not, they themselves aren't being trafficked. They're entering into an employment that they choose to enter into. Then there are those who legitimately are victims who are being ignored when solutions get discussed. So,
that's right.
Yeah. I don't know much. The other thing from the throne speech or from Provincial is we have a new speaker. I don't know much about Randy Weeks. I imagine it's
from bigger,
more of the same. Like I'd be surprised if there's some fundamental shift. The speaker is largely a ceremonial role in a contentious legislature. It can be a little bit different, but like if the Sask party got in with a 1 or 2 seat edge and there's divisions within their own party and the opposition actually has the ability to influence things, the speaker I think at that point you have a speaker who actually has a fair bit of power. You look at Britain over the last decade, their speaker of their house and their parliament has been hugely influential, and part of that's his personality or his former speaker's personality, but it also is the makeup of their parliament. I think, again, it's a pretty ceremonial role here. Not a lot. There's no legislative duties. I remember researching the role of speaker a lot when Andrew Scheer became leader of the opposition. I sort of knew a fair bit about it to begin with, but when Andrew Scheer became the leader of the Conservatives, looking more about speaker because that had been his job, and it is probably the least important position, if that makes sense. Like it's sort of considered from a prestige point of view. It is of the same level of prestige as a cabinet minister, and there's additional pay and it has a lot of ceremonial duties. And you get staff. Commensurate with that of a cabinet minister, possibly even more. So it has a lot of apparatus around it. But it's completely uninvolved from any legislation. You're supposed to be outside the fray of the political dogfight.
Right.
So you're not supposed to be involved in how laws get passed, in committee work, in all of that other stuff that make up the meat and potatoes of MPs' work. You just don't do it. So and prior to Scheer, which is, again, this is a fun bit of trivia, prior to Scheer, federally and in most provinces as well, it's kind of where MPs go to die. Like it's one of those things where it's traditionally where, an MP of the governing party who has served 2 or 3 or 4 terms, has no aspirations on being leader, is probably going to retire within the next decade, and moves into this as sort of a thank you for your service type position. And then Scheer at like age 25 or whenever he first got the role was sort of threw that out the window and said, nope, I'm doing it as a kid. And history is as it is from there. I don't see this being.
No, this is probably going to be
Andrew
much
Scheer.
like
much like the standard. It's going to be a party stalwart, generally liked by everyone within his own party. So. But that's the throne speech in a nutshell. Sort of more of the same. I don't think there were any bombshells in there. I think on the surface, it's probably a little more left wing than I may have expected, but I don't know.
Yeah, on the surface.
On the surface, I think throne speeches tend to have a lot of pretty words in them. Whether it's Liberals or Conservatives or NDP or Sask Party, it's a lot of pretty words, and we'll see the implementation as time goes on. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, obviously. It is the job of Ryan Miley to take issue with it. And so his criticism was that this was a chance to take definitive action on COVID-19 and that, I mean, I don't know. That's his job. He's got to say something. So good work.
And I think most also sort of mentioned how fighting COVID is the number one priority as well. Like he did talk about it.
Yeah,
But again, I think you're right. There wasn't a sense of urgency. And I think like one of the things that I talked about last week sort of came true over the week, not necessarily relation to the throne speech, but just sort of response to Mo in general, is you're seeing the backlash against Kenny and Mo from their own, from who should be their own base or who is their own base, getting angry at them and turning on them. Just a little bit, like a little bit, but it's from the fringe, right? It's not people who are going to turn into NDP supporters,
right?
It's like it's the people who think that wearing a mask is fascism, right? So
yeah, it's interesting because I mean, Kenny is facing a lot more backlash. Although he's doing a much worse job.
Yes. Arguably true. Yeah. Not arguably. Definitely true.
But while Mo still has like a 61% approval rating here. So he's doing quite well.
Still being really popular. So we'll see if that changes. Again, you have a 2-party province. Like Alberta technically has 3 parties or 4. I think Wildrose. Oh no, they're part of the UCP. They're fully.
Yeah, I think they got adapted.
But they still have the Alberta Party, that's sort of the Alberta version of the Liberals, effectively. Right. Although they would stab me in the ear if they heard me call them that. So I guess you can learn to hate the UCP without actually embracing the NDP there.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas here, if you turn on the Sask Party, you have to like the NDP.
We only have 2 options.
Or I guess maybe that's going to create a groundswell for the Buffalo Party.
Oh, maybe.
The Buffalo Party can be the party of the anti-maskers.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they largely probably already are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Because wearing a mask is tyranny. So.
Yeah.
I can transition us into more COVID topics.
Sure.
I think you want to talk a little bit about drive-in churches. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because I think this may be another topic you and I might disagree on.
Well, I'm just not entirely sure. Like, I'm not sure what is happening here, to be honest. Okay. My dad actually brought this up to me, and of course, because he's a very staunch conservative, he framed it in a very particular way. So then I had to look it up for myself. And it does seem like it's possible that maybe these drive-in churches could they could be safe if everybody's following a certain set of guidelines. Like if you're in your car, I don't know, Yeah. But also, how hard is it to do it virtually? I don't know.
And that's what I think. Like, I understand that one of the main purposes of church is a sense of community.
Right.
Like, I would argue it's the primary reason for churches. In that,
yeah, I think that's.
In that, I do not ascribe to the supernatural elements of it, but I recognize there is a sense of community that comes, and for me, I can see why the drive-in churches create more of a feel for that than virtual. Yeah, and it's interesting. My experience on the corollary for that is drag shows. There have been lots of virtual drag shows that have happened in Regina over the last 9 months. But during Pride Week, we did a drive-in drag show where we set up a giant inflatable screen and big stage, and everyone came out to the Center of the Arts parking lot, and it was this huge event, and it was wonderful, and everyone maintained COVID safety guidelines. The province was in a different spot because this was September.
Right. Okay.
But
not
still,
quite as many cases as now. 2
months ago things were a different world. But COVID obviously was still an issue. Yeah. So everyone maintained safe COVID guidelines, and people were very, very careful to be doing so. But I didn't actually get to watch the show because I was doing other stuff to prep for Pride. I was there for like the hour leading up to the show, and then 10 minutes before the show started, I needed to do a bunch of driving around the city for prepping for the next day. Okay. But it was an amazing feeling. It was different than turning on your computer screen. I have to admit, one of the weird things for me and about the idea of doing a lot of this stuff virtually is I don't understand why it needs to be done in real time when it's being done purely virtually, when it's not interactive. When all you're doing is watching a show or watching a preacher on stage, or you're attending a seminar or whatnot. I don't get the value on why it's different than watching a recording. It does feel a little different. It's something that tricks the brain in the fact that we know it's in real time. But the drive-through is definitely in real time. Right? Like the drive-through, you're hearing it on. I think they have like it on the radio of people's cars, but you can also like roll down your windows and listen to speakers. Right, like it.
If you're parked,
that's a
feel. If you're parked reasonably far apart. Then I just don't think I side with the Manitoba government on this one.
Okay.
And I also relate it back to like even during the BLM protests and everything, like, I mean, COVID still was around and they were outdoors and everybody was wearing masks and trying to be as safe as they were. And we didn't see a huge spike from those protests.
Right.
It's
right. Yeah. So I was at the very, I was volunteering to help out at the very first BLM protest. So I was at a sort of a table at the back and had all of the masks and hand sanitizers and all of that being handed out. So I was very much in the thick of the planning, then the logistics around the safety measures, but also just between every single person who came up and spoke, one of the organizers came out and was like, "Hey, everyone, stay 6 feet apart, keep your masks on. Like we need to make sure we are being safe here." And I think you're right. I think when people are doing that, there's ways of mitigating risk and managing risk.
Yeah, it's not risk-free, right? But and I understand that Manitoba, their government right now is very concerned with keeping their people safe. But they also are in a position where they have people going into stores that sell multiple types of items, and they have clothing blocked off. You can't go into the clothing section and buy clothing, even though you are in the store already. And I don't quite understand that. You can limit the number of people in the store, and if people, if you emphasize masks, stay away from people, and you limit the number of people in the store, I'm not entirely sure that I get what they're doing there.
Yeah, it's weird when things are inconsistent. But yeah, I think of all the things to restrict, drive-in church services
seems like
a silly one to me. Like I think you and I are probably two of the least pro-church people there are. I shouldn't say that.
Maybe not the least, but we're not pro-church.
Like atheist roundtable here, supporting churches, right?
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I do. Like at this point, like let people drive to their drive-in church services. Yeah. It doesn't harm you. It doesn't hurt anyone. And I'm reading the rules. They do have to keep their windows rolled up.
Okay.
So it's not even you can crack the window to listen to music through a speaker. It's you're listening to it inside your car.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of community that comes from it. And I think one of the other things, and this does apply to some extent for the virtual too, but like it's the ritual that people miss. It's the ritual of, and not just the church rituals, but the rituals surrounding it, the getting up, the getting dressed in nice clothes, the getting in the car, the driving somewhere, it being an event, it being part of
every reason that I never wanted to go to church as a child. It's the reason that people go to church.
But as humans, we like things that mark time, right? We like things that mark, like how often have someone joked about, and I've like, right now it feels like February was both 4 weeks ago and 37 years ago. Right. Like time is this amorphous thing under COVID. And the passage of time is really strange. And I can see how the ritual of getting in the car, driving a place, having an event to mark your Sunday. Like there's a reason humans adopt all of these rituals in the first place, right? It's not like it just sort of sprung out of nowhere. And Again, if you believe in an instruction from God,
Yeah,
it came out of God giving instructions. But from a
our
more
perspective,
anthropological, religious studies, secular analysis of religion, the rituals that people adopt don't spring whole cloth out of nowhere. There's value to them, and there's reasons why they came into being, and I think the marking of a day of significance can play that role for people. So I was wrong. I thought we were going to disagree on this one, but we agreed. Okay, one of these days we will find something to disagree on.
Well, I mean, maybe today. Depends on how long it takes.
I think maybe. All right, we'll find something.
Okay. So the thing here, I've got Sask Premier hints. More people may be allowed to gather around the holidays, and So I mean, when I saw my partner saw this article the day after I had read it, and she just looks at me and says, "Is Scott Moe crazy?" Like, what is he? COVID doesn't care about Christmas. So. I
saw a meme today, and I'm going to misquote it, but I'll get the gist, which is like, if your connection to the holidays is so fragile that missing 1 year is going to destroy it, you didn't really have you didn't really have that connection you thought you had, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a pretty, as secular as I am, and as more connected to my Jewish ancestry as I am trying to become, I still get a warm fuzzy spot for Christmas. It's part of it's part of my cultural heritage, from the other side, other parts of my ancestry and background and whatnot too. Right, so.
I do not have that same thing.
Okay. You have your
I am almost
happy Christmas.
I am almost 100% Grinch. I have Christmas because I have children. So
that's fair. Different.
Yeah,
so, but Christmas for me this year, Christmas Eve, and my family's always done more Christmas Eve than Christmas Day. I think there's a very good chance my Christmas Eve is going to consist of ordering Chinese food, and depending on where COVID levels are at and what safety levels are at, going to a movie.
Right.
And if it's not safe to go to a theater, staying home, and I'll be by myself for Christmas this year.
Okay. Yeah.
And my kids are spending the Christmas Eve with their mom, and they'll spend Christmas Day with me. I'm not traveling to visit my family. Christmas Eve is going to not be a big thing for me for the first time in a very, very long time. And I'm not feeling, of all the things I have felt sad about, that it comes to missing it with COVID. Christmas specifically isn't, because I think for me, a lot of the things that I connect to, I'm going to connect to in this version of Christmas anyways. I'm going to get all philosophical and religious-y right now.
Okay.
The whole point of the Christmas story is there was no room in the inn, is modifying how you were living your life. It's it was traveling under duress. It was living in uncertain times. It was having external pressures, making life challenging, and having, again, if you believe in the Christmas story, it was like two people and their baby in a manger, or a stable. It'd be like showing up somewhere and there's nowhere to stay, and you're sleeping in a garage, right? You and your spouse and your new baby sleeping in a car in a garage. It's adapting to festivals. It's adapting how we do things. So we have technology to reach out to family. I'm going to have Zoom calls and phone calls.
There you go.
I've sent Christmas presents, like the Christmas presents I bought for my parents have arrived already, and the ones that they sent for me and my kids have arrived already. There's these connections we can still make.
Yeah.
I'd rather celebrate Christmas this year by Zoom rather than spend Christmas next year by memory.
Right.
Because all that's left of someone is their memory.
Yeah.
So that's my rant again for this week.
There you go.
I get onto a roll on these, but I agree with your partner that I think Scott Moe is because it's political, right? People don't want to miss things.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that there's like Quebec made a similar issue where they said, okay, well, for Christmas we're gonna be a little more lax on our restrictions, and a lot of people who celebrate other holidays due to culture or religion were like, well, what about us? Like, how come we didn't get restrictions eased up for our stuff? So it seems, I don't know, myopic and a little bit backwards in a number of ways.
Yeah. Well, like, again, we do live in the province where Brad Wall literally used his Christmas message one year to talk about how Christianity is superior to every other religion.
That is true.
If you're if you're willing to explicitly use a government website to announce that your religion's better than everyone else's, I think it goes without saying that you're going to give special treatment to the religious festivals of your faith over that of the faith of others as well.
Yeah. No, that's true.
But no, I agree.
Indeed.
Like, COVID doesn't care that it's the 25th of December, right?
No, that's right.
It's we can see it was someone else's joke. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to behave in such a way so that it doesn't turn out to be an oncoming train, right? Like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's hope on the horizon, but we can still fuck this up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And like, yeah, the last thing anyone needs right now is a whole bunch of super spreader events that turn January into a worse disaster than it is going to otherwise be, right? Like, people keep talking about how our economy is damaged by lockdowns. Well, then, like, you can't have it both ways. You can't say we need to do everything we can to keep the economy up and running, but then do shit like allow big gatherings over Christmas that negatively impact. One of the other comments, and again, this is one of those ones where it sort of it points to how people think of things.
Right.
Is someone talked about how privileged it is for people to think Christmas is a time of year that people don't have to, that people get to always spend with family.
Oh yeah.
And people talking about, like, I can't remember the last time I didn't work on Christmas. And we still have lots of people who have to, like, who for whom missing Christmas is just the norm.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was in that, one of my, and for me, it was somewhat by choice. I worked in a call center for years and years and years. And when I was first getting into management, in both the years leading up to being a manager, as well as my first few years being a manager, I ended up working as management 4 to midnight on the 25th of December for like 5 years in a row.
Right.
Because they needed someone. I was a low guy on the totem pole. So I said, yes, and because I needed to do that for my career advancement. And I worked the 25th of December, but found other ways of still doing Christmassy things.
It's interesting, like, we have such a high percentage of people who in Saskatchewan who work in the oil industry. And this is not an industry that shuts down on Christmas. Like, sure, it'll slow down, so maybe you don't need quite as many staff, but every place that I've worked has to stay open to some degree on Christmas. So,
well, because shutting down is a big thing. Like, shut down for the oil industry takes like weeks to turn on and off the pipes. There's not a switch.
You just don't do it.
You can't just turn off the lights for a night.
Yeah. The only time they do that is if they know that they're losing too much money.
That's fair. So
yeah.
We have more stories about the call for releasing of remanded inmates.
Yes. Yeah.
That call continues to grow. I think we talked about that pretty thoroughly last week, but I think it's important to note that story isn't disappearing, which is bad that the need for the story is not disappearing. Good that the attention isn't disappearing.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it would be nice to see some action there. I'm not particularly hopeful that we will, but it would be nice, and I do like the people sticking with it.
Yep, it's important.
The Sask Power rebate has started kicking in for various people. I've seen a number of articles from Moose Jaw and Weyburn and Regina saying that this is coming now, so pay attention. Your rebates will be coming soon. So this is something that
Good news story. What else do we want to talk about? There's a bunch. So I guess not about what, but what order.
Yeah, that's right. There's lots to talk about. If we want to stay focused on Saskatchewan, there was some people were being targeted by scams of people who were walking around getting signing them up for their 10% rebate, dressed as an official from Sask Power. However one might do that, I'm not entirely sure. Wearing a blue uniform with no logos and a name tag and a mask, claiming to be from Sask Power. And so this is a scam that's going around that I guess we need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think it's being aware of that type of thing is just good in general. My phone has been ringing off the hook lately.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I have my personal cell phone on my business website, and it's on my business cards as well. So ever since that, I've the target. But luckily, my phone now comes up and just says suspected spam. So I probably are suspected scam. So I'm like ignoring about 10 calls a day. I'm worried though that all of a sudden someone who is a real call is gonna just get flagged as suspected scam on the phone, and I'll miss an important call.
Interesting, just an interesting little thing I noticed is that I work for Instacart and DoorDash, and on both apps there are times when you have to call the customer, but it sends it through the app to a specific number so that I'm not calling you, I'm calling Instacart,
right? And
Instacart calls you. But
makes sense.
But when I call Instacart, it says on my phone that I am calling a suspected spam or scam.
Wow.
So, so if you get a call sometimes from a suspected fraud,
spam,
it might be somebody delivering your groceries or
sigh.
So
I don't know what the solution there is.
Yeah, no, this is just one of those confusing
constantly
things.
Suspicious. I worked in fraud detection for a few years at my previous employer. It was a bank fraud that I was looking at, but getting to go through fraud detection training has always been fascinating for me.
Yeah.
Trying to look into some of the stuff and the techniques people use to try and swindle people is it sucks that it's a thing we need to worry about, but we do.
I
think they're going.
I was just going to say, at my previous job, we did get training for phishing emails and stuff like that. Right. And it's something that I found quite useful actually when I'm going through my regular emails, because you get your Amazon email or you get your PayPal email alerting you to click the button so that you can reactivate your account. Do not ever click this button.
No, never click a rule of thumb is never click a link in an email.
Right.
Like if there's a link in the email, don't click it. Go to the website. Like if you are actually delinquent on your Netflix bill and your credit card payment bounced, or you forgot to update the expiry date or what have you, you can go into Netflix and update your payment information. Don't click on a link.
Yeah, that's right.
And same with Sask Power, right? Like it's if they're coming door to door to sign you up for
and the Canada Revenue Agency isn't phoning you.
No, CRA is not phoning you. So all right, what else do we want to touch base on here?
Okay.
Feds are spending us a lot of spending a lot of money.
Say again?
I said the feds are spending a lot of money.
Yes, they are. $381 billion of deficit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know a lot of people are making big news about it. I just hope that the money goes in the right places and helps people in the ways that they need it. I'm not terribly worried about the deficit. In case one hasn't been listening to previous episodes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But it is making a lot of
conservatives wouldn't be worried about the deficit if it was a conservative government doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's right. So. I also would not be worried about the deficit.
Again, it's the same thing. I'd be worried about what they're spending it on. But that's the same no matter who's in charge.
Yeah. There was so we thought we might have a disagreement on parking. Mm-hmm. So
Regina.
Okay, so CBC. Regina,
the big pit.
Regina City Council votes 6-5 in favor of temporary parking lot at former Capital Point site. Yep. So this is a developer who is interested in buying the lot if they can make it into a parking lot. Yep. And of course, it's going to be paid parking. And I'm tired of paid parking in the city of Regina. As a person who drives my car for money, I hate having to stop and like put a dollar into a meter so that I can go and pick up an order at a restaurant downtown or drop off an order at an apartment building downtown.
So the economist in me has studied this. Okay. So you hate having to put that dollar in the meter.
Yes.
What would you hate more, putting a dollar in a meter or driving around for 10 minutes looking for a parking spot?
Well, because
if you had to choose between those two.
But I do both.
You do both. You will do more of the latter if parking was free. And this is one of those ones where, the idea of a user fee for government service in general is one of those things. Like, increase the amount of parking in general. So, but
yes,
parking is this is one of those cases where supply and demand curves really, it's probably from an economist's point of view, studying parking behaviors is one of the most fascinating examinations of supply and demand curves because it's so. It's so right. Like if you were to actually, it's like a physicist studying things in a vacuum, right? Sense. Like it actually operates using principles that behaviors are supposed to operate on.
Right.
The more you can see a direct correlation between cost and demand. You make parking $1 per hour versus $2 per hour versus free. Like all of these things will have a visual representation of the demand by how many empty parking spots there are.
Right.
And if parking is too cheap for how much parking there is, there won't be parking.
I mean, that is the thing. Like the meters actually are often quite full on the street if you are charging $1 at a meter or whatever. What is empty are the lots where you have to pay whatever fee to the private company. The metered street parking, actually, I guess I get it,
Yeah.
But you've got, you often have, like you say, like these empty lots sitting downtown because nobody wants to pay for their parking there. Or nobody can afford it depending on what they're charging.
Yeah.
Well,
and they're designed for a very specific market, right? Those aren't those are designed to be rented out Monday to Friday during the day.
Right.
What's weird to me is their prices don't go down enough in the evening. But again, I guess meters parking becomes free at that point too. So.
Something that I've found interesting is the free parking on Saturdays.
Yeah. Because
the
2-hour free parking?
You can go down and if I've got an order to pick up, it seems like there's lots of spots open. Like it's just it's just not busy, I guess, because nobody's working, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
like the reason it's free is because there's no demand for it.
Right.
Like although like,
but even the parkade at the Cornwall is free on Saturdays, and that's when people are going and doing their shopping. So
yeah, no, it's like the Cornwall Center though, like most of the people who park in the Cornwall Center Monday to Friday aren't people shopping at the Cornwall Center. They're people who work downtown.
Right. Yeah.
So the reason the parking lot's full Monday to Friday is because they've rented out monthly spots. Right. Like that is when it is full, it is not full because of people shopping. Three-quarters of that, if not more, are people who work downtown.
Versus Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday when it's probably people shopping.
Yeah. And some of that is still people who work downtown too, but
naturally,
like but yeah, the solution is having more parking, but if you don't, and that has a cost above and beyond the financial cost as well, right? Parking isn't pretty. No one wants to turn Victoria Park into a parking lot. Right.
Yeah.
Like there's very, like, you could add however many parking spots by chunking off a quarter of Victoria Park and turning it into a city-owned parking lot.
There's an entire song that says we can't do that.
Yes, right? Don't pave Paradise.
So,
although Paradise in that song is actually a hotel. The song, the hotel is the same hotel as the Hotel California as well, which is fun music history trivia.
Nice.
Sorry, huge tangent there. New record for biggest tangent on this podcast, at least.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, it's you can do it, but it's again that's a cost that's greater than just a financial cost, right? Tear down the library and put a parking lot.
Sure,
there. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, we
like libraries.
There's options, I guess. Yeah,
but anyways, right? And it's and we lost a whole lot of parking with the reconstruction of turning 12th Avenue into that the walking mall, and it's half driving, half parking, which turned 11th Avenue into two-way, which meant I guess there's still parking on both sides now, but only. Like not really, because certain times of day there isn't parking on 11th Avenue anymore. Like there was a significant reduction of downtown parking with the renovations that were done to the downtown a few years ago, and I think that was a major fail on the part of the city manager. As the build was happening, everyone I knew was criticizing it. And time again, I kept being that voice that said, hey, let's wait to see what it's done. You know, we have a city manager who, will have ways of solving these problems, but we're going to go through 2 years of construction, and I know it's inconvenient, but when all is said and done in the end, I'm sure the finished product is going to be a huge improvement. Yeah. And then it really wasn't. Right. The lightsabers are pretty, and I like them, and there are definitely anyone who listens to Regina, who doesn't live in Regina, is going to what freaking lightsabers is Dave talking about? The Saskatoon people are. Does Regina have lightsabers in their downtown now?
Do, yes.
Yeah, we do. It's a thing,
and they are nice. I don't want to.
They're nice,
but
I like. As I'm a huge urban parks and development and like social gathering spaces is should be my thing. Like that's right in my political heartland. But eliminating parking and disrupting traffic flow in your downtown core, and like was dumb, and you can't undo it now.
No, that's right.
What's done is done. Yeah. But Capital Point, using it for parking for years, it's not. Yeah, it's not going to. No one's going to do it if it's not a moneymaker. Yep. Like, the city isn't going to pay money to turn it into a free parking lot.
No, that's right.
Also, just based on where it is, like, again, I'm sure there will be some people parking there. It is not going to be the most highly demanded.
No,
spot
that's true.
in the downtown.
Yeah,
either.
so it should be pretty reasonably priced.
I assume so.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
I guess we'll see. When you said that parking is one of those things where when there's a supply, the demand meets it. Like, I think I've heard that same thing about traffic. Like when you increase the room, like when you increase lanes, then traffic fills those lanes. People drive more. It doesn't reduce congestion. It actually just increases the usage.
Yeah.
So
I think traffic is not on a linear basis, but it depends on, it depends on what other outlets are available. Like there's,
a good city transit system helps.
Yes. And it does reduce congestion to some degree because depending on how bad it had been before and how many people had decided to stop driving and whatnot, right? And it also, like, in a place like Regina, it's not going to expand to the same level because we don't have suburbs, right? So you have Vancouver. When the highway that leads from Coquitlam and Abbotsford and Surrey into Vancouver is super congested, people don't buy homes in Abbotsford and Coquitlam and Surrey as much, right? Like it's you don't live in bedroom communities as much, and I'm sure there's that to some degree. If Arcola was a single lane road and it took 45 minutes to get from the edge of the city to downtown on Arcola, you'd have less people living in White City and Pilot Butte and Emerald Park.
Yeah, that's right.
But when you're dealing with it being 20 minutes versus 15 minutes, and the Pilot Butte, White City, Emerald Park only makes up a port. Like, there's probably a lot more people coming from Wascana View, Windsor Park, Woodland Forest, Land, whatever all those neighborhoods are called.
The Greens.
I live in one, so I should know them. But But like, I don't think you increase the ways of getting to downtown from those communities. I don't think you're going to see a massive increase in the traffic on them.
No,
because you're not going to see massive migration into those suburbs just because there's more traffic available or more roads available.
I could be mistaken, but I think that some of those bypasses, those new-ish roads from the Greens and over on the East End, they have actually reduced the traffic on Arcola in the first thing in the morning and like supper time, evening.
I drive Arcola. That's probably one of the reasons why I bring that one up is because I know it.
Right.
It's never been that bad unless you're going at a very specific time of day. Again, my shift when I was working at the contact center, my shift would vary every 3 months based on shift selection and all that. 7 a.m. versus 7:30 versus 8 versus 8:30. Like that is like that was such a massive swing.
Oh yeah.
And same with, and at the end of the day could be bad.
When I was
even then, it's sort of very narrow windows.
Yeah, pre-COVID, I when I was coming off of a night shift, I would be driving into town, and I could always, like, depending on, like you say, the time of day when I'm driving into town, it would take me an extra 15 minutes to get home. After a night shift, that's a long time.
Yeah, I could see that. I remember, like, I owned an electric car for 5 years. I had to sell it because of life circumstances recently. But it was always that drive home and just sitting there going, this costs me nothing. Because when you're not moving, electric cars don't use fuel, right?
Okay, yeah.
So it's not, you're not burning gas. It's just, it was one of those things where I'm like, I still didn't like the amount of time I was spending not being home. But at the same time, like, meh, I'm in my comfy car.
It's kind of the opposite of your non-electric vehicles, where you're like, I'm burning so much fuel right now doing nothing.
Exactly. So, but yeah, back to the parking thing. I think that Centerpoint Plaza is going to be it's going to be an albatross around the neck of this city for years and years to come, no matter what ends up happening with it. There's such a
have to figure
so much
out.
mismanagement with that. So we'll see where they end up going.
So we're at about an hour.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to get into anything else. This is, I think that's mostly the Saskatchewan focused stuff.
I think so. Yeah. There's a few other things that would be, fun to chat about, but I think we've made people, I shouldn't say make, I'm assuming people are listening to this voluntarily if they're listening, but go less overtime than usual.
Yeah. We're going to force you to listen to us, ethically debate whether or not anti-maskers should forfeit medical care.
Oh yeah. That's what I've been torn on that. I remember suggesting that like a decade ago, not about anti-maskers, but that people should be allowed to buy a stupidity license, which lets you be immune to certain laws, but then you're waiving your right to healthcare. This is I don't know if my day, I mean, probably more than 10 years ago, my days of flirting with libertarianism. Yeah. I was like, yeah, you don't need to wear seatbelts. You don't, here's all of these other, but
we don't take care of you when something happens.
But yeah, but then you're fine. Or the other one is when it comes to organ donation, it's you either you don't even worry about the whole opt-in, opt-out debate. Just say you get this. It's whether you're opting in or opting out. It's based on the organ donation system, not about whether you're an organ donor or not.
Okay.
So you're either choosing to be opted into the organ donation system, in which case when you pass away, your organs, if they're usable, are donated. And if you need an organ for something in life, you are eligible to receive one. That's you get to choose to be part of the system or not. If you don't opt in, then you don't
get one when you need it.
Yeah, if you're saying, and I think that's fair, right? If you're saying I'm ethically opposed to my organs being donated, I'm ethically opposed to this idea, then we will honor that and honor the fact that you're obviously ethically opposed to receiving one if you need one to live.
I see where the argument is coming from. I'm not entirely convinced.
Like I said, this is, and I think the same thing with anti-maskers. Like, as
I know that people want to punish them for being anti-maskers, and it's frustrating to deal with. I'm not sure that we should be taking away their medical care.
No. I have seen a number, and I have seen this from people who I genuinely agree with on 95% of things, but there are memes going around that are something along the lines in various ways, shapes, and forms of if you believe in rights without responsibilities, that's not living in a democracy, that's just being a child. And
there's something to that.
It's bullshit. No, there isn't. Rights are rights.
Yeah. But being part of a society does come with responsibility.
Sure, but that's not linked to the fundamental human rights you have. You do not lose human rights if you don't live up to social responsibilities. There can be other consequences of it. Yes. And I think part of it is people have it stuck in their head that certain things are rights when they're not. There are certain things you don't have the quote unquote right to do. It's not a fundamental human right to go into a Starbucks.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So, and the government, like, one of the other things about rights is they're not absolute. Canada's explicitly, but every state implicitly states that all rights are subject to reasonable limits. So, there are things that we say are restrictions that get placed on you by the state. That's literally with the purpose of the state. If we say people have the right to not have the government place limits on them, that's not a government. But yeah, no, you don't lose your rights if you're not living up to your responsibilities. If we say healthcare is a fundamental human right.
Yeah.
If we say if someone is dying, we take care of them. If someone is dying, we take care of them, even if they're a shitty person.
That's right.
So.
And
all right, we said we were going to wrap up.
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
I got into it.
So that's where we'll stop on that one. All right. So.
All right.
You can find our stuff at anchor.fm/FromManyPeoples. You can follow us on Twitter at skpoliticspod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/FromManyPeoplesStrengthPod. And our email is FromManyPeoples@gmail.com. So that's that.
Right. Well, thank you once again, everyone, for listening.
Yeah.
And next week we can get right back at her and see how things develop.
Maybe it'll be a slow week this week.
Maybe it'll be a slow week. Hopefully it'll be a slow week. Slow weeks are good weeks.
Yeah.
I'm not optimistic at this point.
No,
we'll see.
Me either. Yeah.
All right. Well, it was great getting a chance to chat with you again, Corey. And thanks everyone for listening to us blather on about Saskatchewan politics.
All right.